Hello and welcome back to another video. So today we're going to be taking an updated look at the 2026 US Senate elections. So I know I made a video back in June 2025 about the 2026 US Senate elections and my predictions, but since then we've had some news and some updates in several Senate races, and I wanted my new video to reflect those updates. So let's get started. We have 42 seats for the Democrats so far and 45 for the Republicans. The seats that I've filled out already, those are seats that I think will go by at least 10 points to either the Democrats or the Republicans, and I have those classified as safe seats. For example, the state of Florida, I think Republicans should hold this seat easily by over 10 points. I think Virginia, Democrats will hold this seat by over 10 points. The reason being, Mark Warner, the incumbent Democratic senator, he has a history of overperforming. In 2020, his last race, he overperformed Joe Biden by 2 points, and he won by 12 points that year. And in Virginia, especially, the Doge cuts have cost the jobs of thousands of federal workers that live in the state of Virginia. I think that's going to significantly hurt Republicans in Virginia's elections. And due to those reasons, I think Democrats should easily win Virginia by over 10 points. And then New Jersey, even in the red wave of 2024, New Jersey's they elected a Democratic Senator, Andy Kim, by nearly 10 points in what should be a much bluer national environment. I think Cory Booker easily gets reelected by over 10 points. Now, let's look at some of the likely states. These are states that I think, as of right now, will be decided by 5 to 10 points. In New Mexico, I think Democratic Senator Ben Ray Lujan, he is currently slated to win by high single digits. In 2020, he won by about 6 points, but he did underrun Joe Biden by about 5 points. Now, the environment should be bluer, and I think at the very least, Ben Ray Lujan wins by a likely margin, but this is a race that I could see getting moved to safe Democrat in the future. And a similar story in Minnesota. But we do have an open seat in Minnesota. This is a state that Kamala Harris won by over 4 points in 2026. Incumbent Democratic Senator Tina Smith is retiring, and we do have a competitive Democratic primary between Congresswoman Angie Smith and Lieutenant Governor Peggy Flanagan. But regardless of which Democrat wins this Senate Democratic primary, I think Minnesota Democrats easily hold on to this seat. I think at the very least by a likely margin, but again, this is one of those seats that I could see getting moved to safe to safe Democratic as we get closer to the midterms. Now, looking on over to the Republican side in the state of Kansas, Trump won here by 16 points. However, relative to the national popular vote, Kansas has trended to the left for several election cycles now, and if those trends continue, and if you have a blue wave year, I could see Kansas Republicans winning this seat by less than 10 points. In 2020, Kansas's current Republican Senator Roger Marshall, he won by around 11 or 12 points, even though Trump won the state by 16 points in 2020. So he's not really a strong candidate for the Republicans. And in what could be a really good year for the Democrats, I do think they could move this seat to less than a 10-point Republican victory. So I'm going to put Kansas at likely Republican for now. But if the Democrats can't get a strong candidate, this could be a safe Republican state. And the incumbent Democratic Governor Laura Kelly has already said that she won't run for U.S. Senate. So we'll have to see how things play out in Kansas. Now, in the state of Alaska, the incumbent Republican Senator Dan Sullivan is running for re-election, and Trump won Alaska by 13 points. Sullivan's a solid candidate for the Democrats. I don't know if Sullivan's a solid candidate for the Republicans. We don't know yet if former Democratic Congresswoman Mary Peltola will run for the U.S. Senate. It seems more likely that she'll run for governor. But I think the margin could be closer in a blue wave year. I think for right now, likely Republican is an appropriate rating for the state of Alaska. Now, in the state of Iowa, Trump won here by 13 points, and in 2020, he won Iowa by 8 points. But on the same ballot, incumbent Senator Joni Ernst underperformed Trump. She only won by 6 points. And in 2026, I think Ernst would be a weaker candidate for the Republicans if she did choose to run for re-election. The reason being, she already has a history of underperforming, but also when she was recently questioned at a town hall about the Medicaid cuts in the Big Beautiful Bill, she had a very lackluster response, which generated a lot of controversy, and I think that could play very well for the Democrats in attack ads against Joni Ernst. So I think it'll depend on whether or not she runs for re-election, but I think for now, Iowa is going to be in the likely Republican column, especially in a bluer national environment. And going on over to the state of Ohio, we have a special election to fill J.D. Vance's Senate seat. J.D. Vance obviously resigned from the U.S. Senate to become vice president, and Ohio's governor, Mike DeWine, he appointed their incumbent lieutenant governor, Republican Jon Husted, to the U.S. Senate. I think Husted's been quite popular. I think he shouldn't have a difficult time running for re-election. Now, we do have former Senator Sherrod Brown. He outran Kamala Harris by around 7 points in 2024, even though he lost. And if he does run for U.S. Senate, I think this could be somewhat of a competitive race. I do think if former Congressman Tim Ryan runs for the U.S. Senate, this could be somewhat of a competitive race. But for now, I think Ohio is going to be in the likely Republican column. Now, going on over to the state of New Hampshire, incumbent Senator Jeanne Shaheen, a Democrat, is retiring, and Congressman Chris Pappas is running in the Democratic primary to replace her. And on the Republican side, we have former Massachusetts Republican Senator Scott Brown. And then after he lost re-election in Massachusetts, he ran in 2014 in New Hampshire's U.S. Senate race. He lost to Jeanne Shaheen, and he's running for U.S. Senate again. I think he will lose again, and I think he will lose by at least a likely margin, if not a safe margin. This is one of those states that I could see getting moved to safe Democrat as we get closer to November of 2026. Now, looking at the state of Nebraska, in 2024, Donald Trump won Nebraska by 20 points, but on the same ballot in independent Dan Osborne, he only lost by a little over 6 points against incumbent Republican Senator Deb Fischer. In 2026, Dan Osborne, he is running again for the U.S. Senate. So, and this should be a bluer national environment. So Dan Osborne has that going for him. But going against Osborne is incumbent Senator Pete Ricketts. He has been fairly popular, and he, I think, would be a stronger incumbent than Deb Fischer. So even though the national environment should be a lot more favorable to Dan Osborne, I think Ricketts is a stronger candidate than Deb Fischer. So we'll have to see how things play out in Nebraska. But for now, I think likely Republican is a appropriate rating for the state of Nebraska. Now, in the state of Texas, Senator John Cornyn, the Republican, is running for re-election, and he's facing a primary challenge to his right from Texas Attorney General Ken Paxton, and so far all the polls have been showing Paxton with a solid lead over Cornyn, but Paxton does have his fair share of scandals. He was impeached in 2023 by the Republican-led Texas House of Representatives, and it seems the only reason the Texas State Senate did not convict Paxton was that Trump basically came to his rescue and said, "Don't convict Paxton." Now, and then recently, Ken Paxton faced another scandal. His wife, State Senator Angela Paxton, announced that she is divorcing her husband, Ken Paxton, and the reason she gave was biblical grounds. Now, we don't know exactly what that means, but it's likely due to the fact that Ken Paxton did cheat on his wife. Now, I think that's not particularly going to hurt him in a Republican primary. And I do think whoever Trump endorses in Texas, they are very likely to win the Republican primary in this race. And I do think that endorsement is likely going to go to Ken Paxton. And then on the Democratic side, we have former Congressman Colin Allred running in 2024. Even though he lost to Ted Cruz, he still outperformed Kamala Harris by 5 percentage points. So he is a strong candidate for the Democrats. And I do think Ken Paxton would be a weaker Republican candidate. And if 2026 is a huge blue wave year, combined with the fact that the Democrats have a that the Democrats have a strong candidate and the Republicans have a weak candidate, Texas's U.S. Senate race could be very competitive, similar to how it was in the 2018 U.S. Senate race between Ted Cruz and Beto O'Rourke. So we don't know yet, though, who's going to be the Republican nominee. If John Cornyn is the Republican nominee, I think he wins very comfortably. But if it's Ken Paxton, we could have a real race on our hands. But for now, we will put Texas at likely Republican, pending the results of the Republican Senate primary. And that does get the Republicans to 51 Senate seats. Remember, with J.D. Vance breaking ties in the U.S. Senate, the Republicans only need 50 seats for a majority, but the Democrats would need 51. Now, going on over to the state of Michigan, incumbent U.S. Senator and Democrat Gary Peters is retiring, and we have a competitive Democratic primary between Congresswoman Haley Stevens, State Senator Mallory McMorrow, and Dr. Abdul El-Sayed. We don't know yet who's going to be the Democratic nominee. I don't think Haley Stevens would be a very good candidate, but Republicans did almost win this seat in 2024. Alyssa Slotkin only beat Republican Mike Rogers by 0.3 percentage points, and that was due to vote splitting on the conservative side. But in a blue wave year, I think Democrats should definitely hold this seat, and down ballot, Michigan has definitely been a lot more Democratic in recent years. So for now, I'm going to start off Michigan at lean Democratic, but if the environment does get bluer, I think Michigan could be moved potentially to likely Democratic. And then in the state of Georgia, incumbent Senator Jon Ossoff is running for re-election, and his fundraising numbers have been very good. His polling numbers have been very good. And luckily for Ossoff, popular incumbent Republican Governor Brian Kemp is not running for the U.S. Senate. So Ossoff's Republican opponents so far have been Insurance Commissioner John King and Republican Congressman Buddy Carter. I don't think either of those candidates are particularly strong. And even though Trump won Georgia by 2 points in 2024. Relative to the nation, Georgia has consistently been trending to the left for over a decade now. I think that trend continues into 2026 due to demographic changes. I think Jon Ossoff will win by, at the very least, a lean margin, but I could potentially see Georgia getting moved to likely Democrat in a potentially blue wave year with changing demographics benefiting Democrats. But for now, I think Georgia is going to be lean Democrat. And then in the state of North Carolina, Thom Tillis, the Republican senator, is retiring, and it seems very likely that former Democratic Governor Roy Cooper is going to run for the U.S. Senate. Remember, Roy Cooper was elected governor in 2016 and in 2020 while Trump won North Carolina on the ballot. Both of those years, Roy Cooper is the strongest possible candidate for the Democrats here, and it seems very possible that the Republicans nominate Donald Trump's daughter-in-law, Laura Trump. I think that would be a catastrophic mistake for North Carolina Republicans. I think for now, North Carolina starts off at lean Democratic, But if the Republicans nominate Laura Trump, I think there's a good argument to be made for North Carolina to be moved to likely Democratic. And then finally, in the state of Maine, incumbent Senator Susan Collins is likely running for re-election. However, all of the credible Democratic candidates are running for governor right now. Nobody is running for U.S. Senate. That's at least nobody that could be considered a credible candidate. And until we see such a candidate on the Democratic side, I will have to put Maine at lean Republican. But if we do get a good candidate for the Democrats, I think Maine automatically goes to lean Democratic. The reason being Susan Collins, she's very unpopular right now. She holds a 14% approval rating. Democrats do not like her whatsoever, and neither do independents, and her numbers among Republicans are mediocre. It is possible that incumbent Democratic Governor Janet Mills runs for the U.S. Senate, as she is term limited as governor, but we'll have to see. But for now, I do think Maine is lean Republican until we get a good Democratic candidate. So if you guys did enjoy, please be sure to drop a like and subscribe, turn on post notifications so you don't miss a future upload, and I will see you all in the next video.